Okay, so now we're going to start our lecture over chapter 3 of Creswell. So you'll have that downloaded from right here in week 3. Okay, so we're in week 3 with your literature review. So that's where you'll locate this PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Perfect. Okay, so this week it's reviewing the literature of your Creswell text. So hopefully you've already read this, and so you're just kind of going to finalize some learning content that you've gained after reading this. And then if you have any questions, hopefully they're answered during this lecture. So there's so much information available that can seem daunting when you're trying to sift through it all. There's just so much. So by the end of this lecture, I hope that you will feel more comfortable with the whole literature review process, okay? Um, a literature review is written, it's a summary of different sources, such as journal articles, books, and other documents that describes the past and current information on research studies, okay? And so for this lecture, we're just going to talk like I'm talking to you about your research study, okay? And so then it organizes and then it summarizes all that information into subtopics, and then it discusses the need for the study. So that's the whole purpose of a literature review. Sometimes you'll hear me call it a lit review, and just know that that's the same thing, literature review. So, why is it necessary to conduct a literature review, you might ask? Well, it's so you can document your study and then add to existing literature. You can also provide evidence to your audience that your study is needed to them, so that they need your study. Okay, so that's what you're doing. Now, how does the literature review differ in both quantitative and qualitative studies? So, first, we're going to talk about quantitative studies. It discusses literature heavily at the beginning of the study, mainly for two reasons. First, it justifies the importance of the research problem. So, you've already established your research problem in your topic, and so now you're going to move into your literature review. And so, this is just going to justify the importance of your research problem. Okay. And then number two, it provides a rationale, and then it'll also foreshadow the purpose of your study and the research questions, and then a hypothesis that you're going to pose. Okay. It will also have its own section called literature review in your overall proposal. Okay, it's going to have its own very section. There will be literature at the end of the study as well to highlight how the study compared to previous studies or predictions made at the beginning of the study. Okay, so, but mostly it'll be found at the beginning. Now, qualitative studies for literature reviews, the literature is not discussed heavily at the beginning of the study. So that's what's different, unlike in quantitative studies. Here is when the researcher will document and justify the importance of the research problem, just like in quantitative studies. By not discussing a lot of literature at the beginning, though, this is going to allow the participants' view to emerge without the views of others from the literature skewing or swaying your study. Researchers often cite literature at the end of the study in an effort to compare the results of the study to existing literature. Okay, so here is the process. So it's a 6-step process. The whenever Okay, so let's say you have, let's see where I want to start on this. Okay, let me go through the 6 steps first. So at the top, you'll see identify key terms. So that's step 1. And you're going to use in your search, you use these key terms to search for literature. Okay, just like we talked about with your annotated bibliography assignments or your literature review assignments. One of those, you're going to use those key terms, and also for your ERIC database assignment primarily, you're going to use key terms to be able to find literature. Okay, so you're going to locate the literature about a topic. That's step 2. And remember, there's going to be different databases that you're going to be able to use. I showed you ERIC. I showed you the Tennessee Electronic Library, where you're going to be able to go in and find the GEL, and then it says the educator reference complete. Also, you use Google Scholar. We discussed that. And then your EBSCO Essentials, to name a few. There's so many, but those are the ones that are kind of my go-tos. Okay. The third step is you critically evaluate and select literature for your review. Step 4, you organize the literature you have selected by abstracting or taking notes on the literature. Step 5, you synthesize the literature by important concepts, and then you develop a visual diagram of it or a map. Okay. And then your last step is you actually get to write your review. So you've done all these steps, and now you have everything that you need to be able to summarize the literature to include for your research report. Let's say you had a topic and it's distance learning, like we've used before. Okay. So what you would do is if you have a research problem and it's lack of students enrolled in the online classes at community college, okay, remember your purpose statement was to study why students do not enroll in online classes at community college. Then your research questions are, does the use of internet deter students from enrolling? Okay, so remember we talked about this in previous slides, or lectures. So you would go through these steps to be able to find literature for your topic. So the first thing that you would need to do is you would have your topic, you have your research problem, you have your purpose statement, you have your research questions, you've done all of that. Now you can go and start your literature review, and then you figure out key terms that could go into that, like distance learning, um, enrollment um, difficulties for college. Okay, online internet enrollment issues. It's different things like that you would just kind of go and plug in keywords to be able to start your literature review process search. Okay. So those are the 6 steps, and then we're going to go and we're going to talk about each of those more in depth. So you get really familiar with each step of the literature review process. So step 1 is you identify key terms for your internet search. Okay, you start your search with 1 or 2 keywords or phrases to narrow your topic. So you have your topic, and then you're going to get a few keywords, and then you're going to be able to start your search. Okay. Be strategic though when you choose your words. Okay. And here's a couple strategies that you can use whenever you're trying to figure out what words or key terms to use for your study. Create a working titles, and then use 2 words or so and search that. So like you could create a title for your article for your study, and then pull out a couple words out of that to be able to research. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stick with that title. It's a working title, so that's evolving. So just know you don't have to stick with it. But that's just a strategy that you can use to come up with key terms to use to do your search. Okay. Another strategy is you can create a general research question that you want answered and use 2 words or so that summarize the primary direction of that study and search that. Okay. Also, when identifying key terms, start your search with 1 or 2 words or phrases to narrow your topic. Be strategic when you choose these phrases. You can use these strategies also. You can use words authors use in their literature. So, say you found some literature, use some words that they've used. Sometimes they'll tell you what their keywords are at the front. Okay. You can use online databases like we've talked about already, ProQuest, Tell, Academic Search Premier, ERIC, EBSCO, okay, and then Google Scholar, okay. So those are some places that you're going to use to search, okay. Now, let's see. Step 2 is locate literature. So now that you've identified key terms that you can use those to search for relevant literature. Not all sources on the internet are dependable though. Surprise, right? Okay, so sometimes people post articles that have not been through external reviews. An academic literature database is somewhere you need to start with because they go through a very critical um, process in choosing and reviewing good sources and research. They won't accept anything that's not. So never, ever, 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 ever use Wikipedia. Okay. That's something that I've learned, and I just don't even go there for anything, honestly, because anybody can plug anything on there. It's not scholarly. It's not anything that you want your research to be attached to. Okay. It would just kind of bring like the level of your research down a few notches. Okay. Now, these are some neat ones. Library of Congress. That contains mostly published books. And we're going to learn later, like once it goes through journal articles and it's been around for a while and then it gets published in a book, that's a really good source. Okay. It's been critiqued, it's been reviewed several times. And so once it's in a book, that's a really good source for you to use. And write this down. You can go to catalog.loc.gov, and that's the Library of Congress where you can get published books. So catalog.loc.gov. So we want to use mostly primary sources, but you're going to see a need for secondary sources also. Now remember, that's one of your assignments, okay? So yes, secondary sources are good. You're going to use both primary and secondary, but primarily primary, okay? Primary sources are literature reported by individuals who actually conducted the study or originated the ideas for the study. Examples are like your educational journals. Those are all going to be primary sources, okay? Secondary sources, though, are good and they're necessary, especially when you're starting out your search. You might kind of get some ideas of what's out there and maybe some key terms to search by looking at some secondary sources. And some of those summarize primary sources. So they're a little bit easier to digest, okay? But it doesn't represent material presented by the original author or creator of the ideas, okay? So it's kind of like gone down the telephone line a little bit, okay? Examples of those include like your handbooks, encyclopedias, systemic review articles, and journals that summarize research, such as the Review of Educational Research. So that would be a source that you could go to find that would be the Review of Educational Research, okay? Now, here's a neat little diagram, and this is kind of what I was talking to you about, how ideas first appear, and this is the early stage material, and then it kind of goes through this process. Here's your journal articles, and they've been around for a while. Then they turn into books, and then people will start summarizing them and then putting them. And so the quality has gone through. They've been around for a long time. They've kind of stood the test of time. Is kind of what that means. Okay. So we're still looking at step 2 is the review, locating literature. This is a framework for getting started in a literature search. Starting at the bottom and working your way up, summaries is a good place to start because it gives an overview of topics that's easily read. Okay, they have been around longer and have been reviewed for quality. So the triangle lists the following from bottom to top. So you can see it there what the summaries are in the books and the journal articles and so forth. Okay. So still on locating your literature, step 2. Here are databases that you can use to locate journal articles. And I just kind of want to give you a little bit of information about each one, just so you kind of know like what they are and what you can get from them. So the Web of Science Social Science Citation Index is where you can look up a reference cited in journal articles. So it's kind of like doing a reverse search. So if you find like a reference, then you can look up that reference cited in journal articles and to be able to find those articles. Okay. Um, EBSCO, EBSCO.com, is an online access to more than 150 databases and thousands of journals. Okay, not all of them are free, so just know that. Now, Google Scholar, it's an academic-oriented search engine made by Google. What's neat on that, it's based on Google's search algorithms. And instead of having humans read and index the articles, it's their algorithm that generates the articles for you. Okay, so you might get something a little bit different than you would in these other databases. Okay. Dissertation Abstracts International. Here you can find abstracts. Remember, those are 350 word summaries. Okay, you're going to do one of those this week of dissertations. Okay, so it's just a database for abstracts. Now, Eric, you're going to get real familiar with this one. It's a really good one. It's a national system for information and education since 1966 by the U.S. Department of Education and the National Library of Education. It's free of charge because of where they get the monies to do it. Okay. Psych Info. These are articles related to psychology topics. And then sociological abstracts. Those are literature that's related to sociology and related disciplines. Okay. So there's several software programs. This is pretty cool that you can use to help you keep your references and literature you collect organized. So here's some examples I want to give you. There's EndNote. You may know some of these. Mendeley, Zetera, and RefWorks. Mendeley is free, and that's one that I use personally when I was doing my doctoral work and my master work. So just know that Mendeley is free. Just go check it out, and see what, if you like it, you can save your articles there, and it just helps you keep everything organized. Because whenever you're doing big studies, you can get a lot. I think you're only going to have to do 15 for this particular research, but when I did my dissertation, I mean, you're talking 30, 40, 50, if not more. Okay. Okay. So next. Step 3 is evaluate and select literature. Okay, so now once you've located the literature and you've determined if it's a good source and if it's relevant to your topic, you're going to follow these steps. You're going to select journal articles that have been published in national journals. Those are going to be the better ones, okay? These are reviewed by multiple editors and critiqued before accepted by publication for publication. Number 2, use refereed or peer reviewed. You'll hear me say peer reviewed. That's how I've learned it. Sources. So their quality of writing and scope of rigor of data collection processes analysis have been carefully screened. Okay, so that's super important to click that little button that says peer reviewed. Okay. Number 3, locate research studies to use in your literature review. Research studies consist of posing questions, collecting data, forming results, conclusions from the data. Number 4, use both quantitative and qualitative sources. You're going to use both because each of them have their advantages and they can provide insight to educators. Okay, so you want to kind of do both of those, include them both. Also, still with step 3, when you're doing your literature review, evaluating and selecting literature, you need to make sure the sources you found are relevant. Okay, to determine relevance, think on these things. And if you answer yes to all 4 of these, then the literature is relevant to your literature review. So here are the 4 things. So does the study focus on the same topic of your proposed study? Okay. Does the study examine the same individuals or site that you want to study? Does the study look the same at the same research problem and questions as your study? That's not going to be the exact. They're talking about generalities here, okay? And then, is the literature available to you? If you answered yes, then awesome. That's a great one. It's relevant. You need to keep that as a source, okay? Okay. So now step 4, you're going to organize it all because this can get kind of like a lot. So once you've located the literature, it's time to organize it for your literature review. You need to save and print the literature. That's my suggestion. I would get a binder and I would save them all, print them, and put them in a binder. Okay. Quickly read it, take notes on it, and see how it fits into your overall literature. Copyright laws permit the duplication of only one complete article without permission of the author, so you are allowed to make a copy of it. You may choose to organize the literature by keywords, topic, or sources. Okay. When taking notes, you may include the following: 1, questions being addressed; 2, data collection; and 3, any major results of the study. Include those things. When you abstract the article, you're summarizing the article in 350 words. Okay, do not go over. Quantitative abstract articles, okay, they're similar, but they're not exactly 100% the same. So quantitative has a research problem, research questions, or hypothesis, data collection procedure, and results of the study. While qualitative studies, abstracts, they are going to include your research problem, your research questions, so it doesn't have a hypothesis, data collection procedures, and its findings. So instead of results of the study, they call it the findings in qualitative studies. So they're similar, but just know there is a little bit of a difference. Okay? Okay. So step 5 of the literature review process, now you're going to synthesize the literature. When you synthesize it, you're organizing it by important concepts and developing a visual diagram. Okay? The goal is to report the key themes related to your topic. You don't want to just list the reports linearly. You want to synthesize the reports by organize it by concepts and interrelate those concepts. Okay, you don't want to just be like this happened and this one said this and this one said this. You need to kind of form it together like a web. Okay, you can begin by creating a table or grouping the studies based upon your abstracts you previously completed in step 4. In this table, list the major concepts in the first column, okay? And then in the related studies in the second column. And do this like as a T chart, okay? And then you'll be able to see kind of where they cross. You could also create a visual picture of the studies. It's called a literature map to help you organize the study. And we're going to go into great detail about literature maps. But I think the T chart, that's pretty simple. That's something that I would probably do. So I'll say it again. On the first column, you just list the major concepts, okay? And then you're going to, in the second column, put the studies that hit those major concepts. And then you'll see which ones are both, and then you can see how those studies um, combine or interrelate, okay? Oops, sorry. Okay, so here's our literature map information. So once you've taken notes or abstracted the articles, you'll begin to understand the content of your literature review. A conceptual picture will emerge. It allows you to organize the literature in your mind and identify where your study fits in the literature. So think about that. You need to think, how does my study fit in this overall big picture of all of this literature? Okay? And then you'll be able to use that to convince others of the importance of your study. So be thinking about that. That's super important. A literal map of the literature is formed as a visual picture. Okay. So a literature map is a figure that displays the literature on a topic. This will help you to see overlaps in information or major topics in the literature that can help you determine how your study will add to the existing literature but not duplicate it. Okay. You don't want to duplicate it because then why'd you even do the study, right? So when constructing a literature map, follow these guidelines. Number 1, identify key terms and you're going to place them at the top. And then number 2, sort the literature into 3 or 4 groups by topics. And these are called families of studies. So it's like, here's a family topic over here, a family of topics over here, and then you want to do 3 or 4 of those. Okay? And then give each group a label. So you're going to label what each group represents, okay? And then those labels then become your headings in your actual literature review. So it's kind of a neat way to be able to create your headings and to be able to segment everything. So it's a really, really, really good method to use to synthesize your literature. So, let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here's an example of that, a literature map, okay? So the literature map shows the following. The need for teaching programs to be culturally responsive. It divides it into 2 parts, study abroad programs. So here's the need for teaching programs to be culturally responsive, okay? So they need to have programs for in place for students that respect their different cultures to be able to help students, okay? So there's different study abroad programs, and then there's also U.S. programs. So they broke that down into 2 different parts. Now, study abroad programs, so now we're looking at this over here. Study abroad programs further divide into the following. Okay, attitudes towards study abroad. So they found that as like a family, you would say. Remember, we talked about that? So this is just kind of a group over here. Personal insights of pre-service teachers. That was something else that they grouped, okay, and found a family. And then predominantly English speaking cultures, and then possible improvement. So those are just some categories that came out, some subtopics out of this big topic from stemming from their overall topic. Okay, and the same thing for U.S. programs, conventional programs, cross-cultural programs, and then personal insights of pre-service teachers. And these are all the articles that fit each one of those. Okay, I really don't see labels on there though. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So we're synthesizing a literature map helps you synthesize the literature instead of just merely reporting it chronologically. Okay, so that's why we want to synthesize our literature so that we're able to create a way to organize it that's interlinear. Okay, it's not just chronologically listing it, okay? Now, here's another way that you could do a literature map. You could do a circle map. Okay, so at the top you have your need for your study, non-English speaking cultures. Then you have a question. Okay, do short-term study abroad programs and non-English speaking cultures help create cultural responsiveness in pre-service teachers? And then here you go. Here's your study abroad programs. Here's your U.S. programs. Okay, the circle labeled study abroad programs. I guess that's your label. I guess you could consider that the label. Let's go back. That would be like a label. It could be like a heading in your paper. Okay, so I would say that. So then this would be like your label: study abroad programs. Points to the question listed at the top. Okay, and so here's like your other label: U.S. programs. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so now we're going on to the next step of our literature review process. It's the last step. We've made it. So you're going to actually write your literature review. So once you've scanned the literature and determined its relevance, you've abstracted it, you've synthesized it by concepts, you've organized it into a literature map. Now it's time to construct the actual written summary of the literature. So you're going to use your APA manual, and it's going to provide you with a consistent format for writing your research report. That's why we use our APA manual, okay? Now, there's going to be different types of citations you're going to do. The first one's called end of text citations, and those are mentioned at the end of your report as your reference list, okay? So they have a hanging indent, double space, and they're listed alphabetically by author. Refer to page 313 in your APA manual for more information on your in-text references. Now, just know anything that you quote or cite within your literature review, it must have a reference that goes and links to it at the end in the reference list, your end of text reference, okay? Then you also have within text references, and those are formatted different ways, but just know they're generally called within text references. These are cited within the body of the paper to give credit to the authors. And then you need to look at page 266 in your APA manual to learn more about those. Okay? So write that down. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to have different levels of headings in scholarly writing. Within your within text references, on the front cover of your APA manual, I want you to look here. So if I say just look at your front cover for some things, just know this right here is what I'm talking about. So the first part is your headings. So that shows you real quick what headings and what they look like and how you need to format them. And then the next one's your basic in-text citation styles and then how to do those, okay? So those are found on page 266. So if you want to know more about how to do headings, that's on page 47 in your APA manual, and there's a whole bunch more about it. Just know that they provide logical subdivisions of your text, and they provide important clues to the readers that help them to understand your study. And I really like being able to pull off of your literature maps those labels to be able to use as your headings within your literature review. I think that's a really neat strategy to use. Okay, so then you don't have to think about it. It's grouped, it's synthesized properly. Whenever you do a thematic review of the literature, it's when the researcher identifies a theme and briefly cites the literature to document this theme. Only the major ideas or results are discussed. A study by study review is a detailed summary of each study grouped together under a broad theme. And that's kind of what we're doing for this class, is more of a study by study review. Okay. Let's see. Getting to the end here, guys. Concluding statement of the review is how you end the literature. So this is important. You don't want to just be like synthesize, found this, found that, and then that's it. No, you're going to have like a little conclusion at the end, okay? And then when you do that, it's going to summarize the major themes that you found in the literature. So you could restate those labels, those headings, and kind of discuss them. And then give rationales for the need of your study and the importance of your research problem. So let me repeat that again. So whenever you find those themes in your literature, it's going to give you, you're going to summarize them, and then it's going to give you a rationale for the need of your study and the importance of your research problem. So you need to state that at the end of your literature review. Okay, you got this. Okay, so here is just having you to go and look on page 28 of your Creswell text, and this will show you a literature, kind of just the highlights of a quantitative study. And then here is the qualitative study research article that's on page 41 of your text. Okay, so just know that you can kind of go that and just re-examining those, and it's just kind of giving you some information that you just learned, and then you can kind of see that in practice. Okay, so this one is your qualitative study, and that's on page 41. Okay, so that's it. I know that's a lot, but I think it's easily to be digestible, especially if you are reading and you're taking notes. If you have any other questions, please know that I'm here to help you with those. And I think you're going to do fantastic doing these assignments this week. And y'all have a fantastic week. Thank y'all so much. Take care. Bye bye.